Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today we're going over my updated U7 Goku list, which you may have seen in yesterday's coaching series video. In that video, we go over how to navigate aggro mirror matches, so be sure to check that out if you're playing aggro, maybe struggling with how to combat other aggro decks. But anyways, I want to share my profile because it was asked for one, and for two, this is a very different version of U7 Goku that I really like. This is not the cookie cutter commonplace build that you guys may have seen. I'll explain why I like this build as opposed to the other build. Not that there's anything wrong with the other build, it is very good, but I guess I'll get more into that as we get into the actual profile. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and if you guys want to help support the channel, many ways down in the description to do so as always. But today, guys, if you're interested in stepping your game up, maybe you're interested in coaching like yesterday's coaching series video, or you guys really like red and want to see my GT Goku deck profile for set 17, go down to the Patreon, go check that out, let me know what you think. Anyways, let's get into this. So by now we all know the leader, basically playing a red mill deck, so we're trying to generate advantage in our drop area. Not that red's as good at that as black is, but I mean, it still just does a lot for what the deck wants to do. But we are starting off with 4 copies of Piccolo Jr. So the really common and popular version of U7 Goku is the 3-drop Unison build, normally revolving around Jiren Unison, sometimes Sin Shenron Unison. And that build is very good, don't get me wrong. There are lots of great pros to playing that version. You have Jiren, which is a really great Unison. You have access to Videl counterplay, which is a great counterplay. But for me, I like the 2-drop Piccolo version better because 1, it's searchable within the deck itself, and 2, the thing with the 3-drop build is you want to play a lot of your aggressive pieces on turn 2, but that doesn't always happen. Either you don't draw into them in the appropriate time, or your drop area is not set up if you didn't mill properly. We are playing a self-mill deck. There is an element of RNG there. So I really like setting up my turn 2 Unison. That's going to draw me a huge hand. There are plenty of ways to protect it in this deck, so it's very similar to something like King Piccolo, where you play Piccolo Jr. and it doesn't really die all that frequently. And we'll get more into that as we see more cards. But yeah, that's one of the main reasons, or a couple of the main reasons, that I really like 2-drop Unison build. And there's another big reason, but I can't get to that until I get to the actual text. So anyways, we have 4 copies of Sign of Mastery Goku, incredible card, 4 copies of Yamcha. So this is a downside for the 2-drop Unison version for sure. Videl is definitely the better counterplay, but I mean, all the other pros I listed is why I still like the Piccolo Jr. version, and Yamcha's still good. There's still plenty of, good ways to use Yamcha. So if you guys didn't know, whenever your opponent's playing a battle card by a skill, you can actually use both these cards in one counterplay, well, technically within 2 windows. So in window 1, you'd use Son Goku Sign of Mastery, and because he's an auto, he won't actually use his minus ability yet. And then in window 2, you can play Yamcha to minus 15 whatever is coming into play by a skill. And then because Goku's an auto, that's going to come after Yamcha, which is a full counterplay effect. And then you can use Goku to, kill anything 30k or less, basically, that Yamcha already minused, and then draw your cards. That's a really cool combo in this deck. Of course, you can do the same thing in the 3-drop Unison version, but you got to make sure you have the appropriate energy, and sometimes casting Unison for 3 is very expensive in some matchups, which is another reason why I don't like the 3-drop Unison build. But anyways, moving along, we have 4 copies of our super combo, of course, 4 copies of Frieza, and 4 copies of Android 17. And this is what I was talking about before, where the 3-drop Unison build wants to quote-unquote pop off on turn 2 and play both of these guys ideally on your turn 2, and then go to turn 3 and play Jiren. When you can pull that off, that is an insane amount of pressure. But again, we're playing a 60-card deck, we're playing an RNG-based deck, and if we don't have the best mills going into our second turn, we can't play these cards. And I've played a lot of 3-drop Unison build, guys. There is a fair amount of time where my turn 2 is literally spent doing nothing, or just playing like 1-drop cantrips, and it doesn't feel very good. Like, I love being able to play Piccolo Jr. on 2, make sure my mills are set up perfectly for turn 3, because by turn 3 you'll have milled way more than 5 U7s usually, right? And I'm setting up a draw engine, which is incredible, so I really like this a lot for that reason. Then we have 4 copies of Android 17 Heeding the Call, 2 copies of Goku Divine Presence. Divine Presence is a card that I want to cut more and more. I was playing 3 for a while, but I've cut it to 2. It's so rare that I ever cast it, but when you do cast it, it is a really big powerhouse. It's kind of just good in those random scenarios where your 8-drop boss monster is not good, and that's pretty few and far between. But I mean, for that reason, I'll still include 2 copies of the deck. It's a U7, it's a pitch target, it's chargeable, like, it's totally fine. 2 copies has not really, made me hate the card or anything. Then we have 3 copies of Goku Ultra Mastery. I've been perfectly fine with 3. I've pretty much been playing 3 copies on release. I don't think you need 4. Generally, you'll always see one by turn 4, and if you don't, you can always pick it up with your leader's awakened ability, so that's really good. And this card is just such a beast in so many matchups. Like the Deflect, yellow is not playing a lot of counterplays that interact with Deflect right now. Blue virtually can't interact with it unless they're on the Dirty Burst tech, which I think is a great card in blue right now, but a lot of people aren't playing it. Yeah, most colors just can't do anything to interact with this guy, so you're playing him, you're attacking, you're looking at your opponent's hand. It's great. The only real downside of this card is that it is pretty energy costly in the sense that a lot of times on turn 4 you'll tap out, but I like to hold my awaken to turn 4 if I can and play this guy and then awaken. And there's another reason to do that later on, but yeah, by taking your 1-drop cantrips and then comboing them off early, like to maybe stop like 10k attacks, that's actually going to get you farther into the late game where you want to be. So that's just a piece of advice there. Anyways, we have our Vegeta SCR, of course, one of the best SCRs playing this deck. You can pick it up from the drop area. You have a couple options. I mean, if you don't own this card, you can always play Pan, you can always play Kai, you can always play Heroine's Lineage. You can probably even play Goku Frieza, although it's a turn 5 SCR as opposed to a turn 4, which is definitely relevant. But I mean, if that's the card you own, you can certainly play that card. There's no problem there. 1 copy of Furring Truction Champa. Normally in red decks, I'm playing 2 copies of this, but I found that I was like never really using it because our boss monsters are so big and I was charging it so much. So I cut it down to 1. I think the 1 of is still perfectly fine. It's the alternate win con if you need it to be there. It is 60 cards. It is a bit inconsistent at 1, and you can, of course, mill it. But I mean, anytime that happens, I don't really ever miss it. 4 copies of SSB Vegeta for the Universe Survival. Okay, I mean, I see a lot of lists like not play this card or play like 2 copies. I think this card's so incredible. Like, it helps you clear boards, helps you play more of a mid-rangey version of the deck, which, again, this deck can lean into heavily because Piccolo Jr. is helping us draw a crazy big hand. I just absolutely love this card. I don't know why I'd play less than 4. And again, you need U7s in the drop, right? So it goes towards those ratios. You might mill copies. You don't generally want to pick up any of your little guys from the drop. Like, mainly what I'm picking up from the drop is either of my boss monsters, my SCR or my Goku Ultra Mastery, or super combos. It's super, super rare that I'm picking up like a Frieza, an Android 17, or a Vegeta. So playing them all at 4, I mean, you'll see plenty of copies of them in your hand. 3 copies of Testing the Op. Okay, we cannot really control our life in this deck per se, which is why I'm not playing 4 copies of Testing the Op like I am in King Piccolo. So yeah, 3 copies have been totally fine. Playing 2 copies of Violent Rays in the main deck. I think it's just a really good meta call right now. Violent Rays is very good against a lot of decks, and it actually, surprisingly enough, is really good against a lot of the Unison decks. Like anything in blue playing SS3 Gogeta, anything in yellow playing Trunks Unison. This card puts in a ton of work. 4 copies of Gohan 1-drop. So with this set, there was an Android 18 TP, and it's technically the better card in this deck because it's got 5k power as opposed to 4k. I really don't know why they felt the need to print another 1-drop cantrip that literally searches for the same things that Gohan Ultimate Essence searches for. I don't play skillless cards in this deck. I know there are skillless versions of the deck floating around as well. I don't particularly like those versions because it requires the Gohan to stick around, and like I said before, I'm either comboing him off early or he's just getting killed by whatever my opponent's playing, right? But I mean, I'm playing this card because I didn't want to go out and buy the TPs. There's really no purpose. Again, that marginal 1k power, if you have to go for game with one of your 1-drop cantrips, I mean, it sucks, but this card looks way better, so I'm not too worried about it. 4 copies of Afterimage. Okay, so this is a card that I was not playing in my initial list that I posted on the Patreon before the set came out. But I learned more and more that this card is actually very, very vital to this version of the deck in particular, and not so much to the 3-drop Unison version, because it is probably your best card for protecting Piccolo Jr. You're going to have Sparking 5 by turn 2 every single time, so you can use this to protect Piccolo Jr. And because a lot of the time when you play Piccolo Jr., you're going to be at high life, Afterimage is going to be live before Testing the Op is. But the cool thing about this is you can use Afterimage to get yourself down to 5, then use Testing the Op if you need to, if your opponent's like really going ham at your Unison. And any cards you spend to defend Piccolo Jr., he's going to draw you back, which is absolutely incredible. Yeah, Afterimage, it's not so great in terms of like getting crazy value off of it. Like it's not the 2-for-1 attack stopper that it used to be necessarily, but I mean, again, it's still good for protecting your Unison. And the fact that it's always live with this leader is really, really good. Moving along, 3 copies of Vegeta Resolve Renewed. One card that I cut from this list that I used to play back then was Koitsukai. Would definitely still consider sideboarding it because in this deck it's got really good synergy. You can always pitch it with your leader, so it's always just naturally in your drop. Besides, if you besides milling it, I mean. So yeah, that card I cut from the main board because we're already playing answers to our opponent's floodgates. So I didn't really feel the need to also have Koitsukai in the main. I would still side it though, because it's still an incredible card against King Piccolo. So for that matchup, you want to bring it in, but for the rest of the matchups, it's not super really needed. So yeah, I don't think I need it in the main. One copy of New Ruler, of course. And then for the really spicy stuff, we have one copy of Heartfelt Plea and 3 copies of SS Son Goku, the Legend Personified. So I gotta shout out my teammate Mike for this. He put me onto this hot tech and I really like it. So I was actually messing with Heartfelt Plea in this deck, and the main way I was trying to pull it off was either using the 8-drop, so holding my Awaken to turn 4 and then playing the 8-drop and then, you know, attacking with that, and then attacking my leader, Awaken and activate Heartfelt Plea that way, or defensively awakening with After Image plus like any of my battle cards. Those were the main 2 ways I was trying to resolve Heartfelt Plea. But then my teammate Mike reminded me this card's a thing, Goku Legend Personified. Let me click out here and kind of just pull up the card real big. So it's a unique 1-drop. When this card's played, draw a card, activate main bond 3, which is super easy in this deck by turn 3. Once per turn, if your opponent has 3 or more energy, this card gets plus 21k until the start of your next main phase. So this fixes the problem I was having of actually resolving Heartfelt Plea in like a realistic manner, because sometimes you're getting, you know, pressured quickly, or you have to awaken on turn 3, and this is a 1 energy investment that will, you know, set up your Heartfelt Plea play, and this has been actually pretty consistent. So when you do happen to have the 1 Heartfelt Plea, when you don't mill it and you know, you have it in your hand ready to go, this is actually a really cool combo. And besides that, I mean, even if you're not pulling that off, this is not the worst thing. It's a 1-drop 25k attacker in a deck that can actually apply ample pressure. So I've liked this a lot, guys. Of course, I want to know in the comments below what you think about this list. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.